What we do is foresight-driven innovation,
Max is tasked with a strategic foresight at KSB.
what we call pop futurism or trend marketing. We already see the second space age. We often say we are living in a VUCA world. Usually our time horizon is beyond forecasting. I think this will be quite interesting to see.
Hello, my name is David Küpper and I'm the Managing Director of Expert Powerhouse. At Expert Powerhouse, we are helping teams with on-demand consultants and experts for their projects. I'm happy to start the fifth and last episode of our EPH talk. This episode is about a topic that is extremely interesting since everyone is looking at what the next year and what the future will bring. In times of increasingly rapid change and disruptions that we saw in 22 and that will surely last until 23, we are faced with a growing complexity and critical uncertainty. Responsible governance and leadership requires us to prepare for the unexpected. This is where strategic foresight is needed. Strategic foresight is required whenever there is a high degree of uncertainty surrounding changes to the relevant future context. To me, foresight sounds like a process and technique that helps organizations to look into the future. Is that right? If yes, how does it work? If we can look into the future, how do we deal with such information? How do we process information into plans and strategies? I'm very excited to speak to Maximilian Panthen, Head of Innovation Management at KSB. Maximilian worked as a postdoctoral researcher and lecturer at the University of Bayreuth and is now successfully heading the Innovation Management Department at KSB. KSB is one of the world's leading suppliers of pumps and valves and related systems, with over 15,000 employees and a yearly revenue of more than 2 billion euros. Max is tasked with a strategic foresight at KSB and is an established expert in that topic. Today, he will be our crystal ball to look into the future. Max, welcome. Can I push you directly into the cold water? Max, can you look better into the future than others? And if yes, what do you see?
Hi, David. Yeah, thank you for having me for this noon talk, at least here in Germany. Yeah, actually, I have to disappoint you at that point. We don't have a crystal ball, but we try to outline, and maybe this is one of the first lessons, the possible range of different futures. We are not necessarily talking about the single future, but about plausible different versions of the future, if you want. So that could be very worse options for us as a company, but also very positive and best case scenarios.
Let's start at the beginning, maybe. Please explain strategic foresight for us. And what exactly do you foresee?
Yeah, well, strategic foresight started back in the 50s, 60s, and is now regarded more as an organizational ability to look into the future. And as I said before, we work with different methods and tools like Delphi method, like trend analysis, weak signal spotting, area to inform either our strategy colleagues, for example, at what we do at KSB, but also to support our innovation initiatives. And usually our time horizon is beyond forecasting. And I think that is a crucial difference between forecasting, so taking past data, and between foresight, looking more into the critical uncertainties, into the opportunities. And when you do this task, then we'll see some differences to the 1 and 2 year horizon. I give you an example. At the moment, we face an energy crisis, at least here in Germany, Western Europe. But there are scenarios that say in 10 to 20 years, there will be abundant green energy available. And I think 2 days ago, there was this experiment about fusion energy. This somewhat contradicts our usual business as normal strategy development process.
Let's go a bit more into detail into these techniques. You mentioned already techniques or methodologies. Let us understand a bit, not too technically maybe,
Yeah.
but what kind of methods you use and how that works, what the processes are that help you to develop a foresight.
I think it really depends, as always, on your organizational background and also on what you want to achieve with these foresight tools and methods. And what I often say is that you can start small with analysis of drivers of change, for example, the givens and the unknowns, until you have very established foresight methods like the scenario planning process or road mapping, which requires some resources. What we at KSB do, we like to work with trends, with trend management. We also have a digital backbone for that. Then there's also Delphi method, so asking basically experts about the future. It really depends on, yeah, how big actually your foresight department is, how much resources you have, and which other organizational functions are available. I should recognize that it's quite close to also market intelligence. So we work closely with that, at least at KSB, with our strategy colleagues and market intelligence colleagues.
And when you say you use these trends, is that about, are you talking about mega trends that are widely known that you use then for your foresights? Or what do you mean?
Yeah, exactly. What you find on the internet is abundant information about trends and
Mm.
information. For example, what we really like to use as a resource is the World Economic Forum Strategic Intelligence Platform. They have quite good data there. But the important point about foresight actually is to transfer these insights to your company. The interesting and most important question is, what does that actually mean for us as, for example, a manufacturing company with a global presence and footprint? So megatrends, yes, climate change, urbanization, value change, all that stuff. But some organizations, I have to admit, only use it for what we call pop futurism or trend marketing. Especially sustainability efforts are in that domain. You really want to inform your strategy or your innovation department, you have to dig deeper, analyze micro trends, drivers, and different prospects, different versions of this trend in the future. Yes, otherwise, it only stays on this superficial level.
And now you're the head of innovation at KSB. You touched upon it already, but what is exactly the link between foresight and innovation?
Yeah, it's a really good question because it's called strategic foresight or corporate foresight. What the hell has it to do with innovation? What we do is foresight driven innovation. So we are right at the beginning of the innovation funnel, usually called fuzzy front end. So what we do is we have search fields where we search for trends or also signals, also technologies. It depends on the project. And based on these insights, we try to develop innovation projects. So we hand this over to our innovation unit, so our digital innovation unit or classical product development. And the other exit we already mentioned is strategy, and it is one of our strategy pillars beside markets and competition.
And that is also very interesting. It's probably like that the foresight then informs strategy, that again then defines which fields you're gonna play or want to play, which then defines, of course, also a bit the innovation work. Is that correct to
Yeah,
assume?
correct. It really depends on the project size and what you want to do. For example, when you have a very specific question, for example, about new technologies in metal 3D printing, then this is more an innovation technological foresight prospect. Whereas when you're in the strategy world, you probably know the STEEP environmental scanning framework, where you analyze your organizational environment according to 5 different dimensions. Then you are more in this broader strategic search direction. And but it really helps when you want to establish foresight to have some kind of a backbone, because things are reoccurring. And this is also what I often say, and what some people get wrong, that you have to do it with feedback loops to see what changes, because naturally a trend is defined by 2 points in time and the change in between. So these feedback loops and reoccurring assessment of trends is also quite important.
And then from my experience, of course, assumptions, to build up a strategy, assumptions are crucial. And the strategy depends a lot on those assumptions that you take. What kind of role do assumptions play in foresight?
Very important role, because at some point you have to start. We often say we are living in a VUCA world, everything is so complex and so uncertain. Actually, at the beginning of the work, you have to define what is given and what is unknown and uncertain. And the interesting thing, or the twist with foresight, is that you identify these critical uncertainties and give them different ratings, how they will develop in the future. And there are different versions of that. And these go into what we then call scenarios or scenario planning. So, for example, usually a scenario study consists of 3 or 4 different scenarios, like a best case, worst case, and something in between. And another difference is that you see not singular trends or assumptions, but also see how they impact each other. So, what we call a cross impact analysis. This is quite challenging sometimes, but it really helps you to make your strategy a little bit more robust.
And is it also, if you talk about these different scenarios, is it also that a different scenario also then has impact on the innovational work that is being done? Or that, or I put it in other words, that the innovational work is based on what kind of scenario you look at?
Definitely. And it should inform your organization and what you want to do in the future. And in some scenarios, you play a really good role because, for example, let's take the green energy scenario. You have a foot in the door in this renewable green energy thing. And if we see 2, 3, 4 robust developments in this area, of course, we invest more in certain areas that come out of this scenario work, for example, different forms of energy consumption or energy storage, batteries, for example. Yeah, this is how we work with trends, with scenarios, and see and link it with innovation.
And you said just now that, of course, you inform the strategy department or the people that are in charge of developing the strategy. How do you interface with other departments and teams that are tasked with planning, with the forecasting, with the budgeting, and so on? How does that work?
Yeah, also a good question. I recently read an article that corporate foresight is filling the gaps between strategy, R&D, innovation, and also risk management. And this is actually true in practice, because all what we do analysis phase is just raw material and doesn't create value in that sense for an organization. Where it creates value for organization is when it gets into actions and practice. So we are really focusing on these interactive foresight methods. And to answer your questions, with many departments, with our digital innovation, with our digital unit, with our business innovation lab, but also with a classical product development and our core target group, if you want, so are business developers and market strategists of the different market areas we have. At KSB, we have a huge variety of products, ranging from products of this size and to products in the mining business of 95 tons. We work very specifically with the market areas to also address their specific needs. And this goes back to your questions about the megatrends. When I say here's a megatrend that is called resource scarce, then this doesn't really help to develop the strategy in a specific market area, neither innovation in a market area or product range. Yeah, we have a more customized approach in this sense.
The most important question, Max, that I want to really ask, what does 2023 look like for you personally? What do you know that we don't know? Please share everything. We are like in a small circle.
Yeah, this also goes back to the point I just said, that when we look in 2023, we are talking more about forecasting, taking what's already present. So energy crisis, inflation, different levels of inflation. And there won't be a big change in 2023, I think. what's interesting from the foresight perspective is what can be the turning points or strong signals that will come up. For example, we had in 2015, 2016 or so, a foresight study where it says there will be more global diseases, and a pandemic is a very likely scenario in our globalized world. And what we saw in 2020, 2021 is exactly that. So to answer this question in short, for us as foresighters, we often look beyond the next year. So our time horizon would then more be like 2030, 2035, 2040. Nevertheless, what I can say is that for KSB at least, it's really good that the trend and foresight work we did a few years ago really now helps the market strategists to refine their strategies and market development. So, for example, in new energy production, hydrogen, LNG, direct air capture. So, yeah, this is my answer to that question.
And but you said like you're looking at like developments 2030, 2035. Is there something we should be aware of from your perspective? Is there something that is like intriguing yourself, that excites yourself?
Yeah, definitely. There is a scenario or a trend, what we call, and what we already see is like the second space age. I think this will be quite interesting. I mean, with Elon Musk, and these are the iconic people working in this area, but also with this satellites, with resources we can gather on the moon or other planets. I think this will be quite interesting to see how technology, will unfold and whether we see second space age and whatever will happen there. And when you look into these scenarios and these future studies, there are people living on the moon, stuff like that, but it could also unfold like there are big starships, stuff like that. For me, I find this quite interesting, and also has to do a lot of science fiction, right?
Great to see what technology can enable. Max, can you share 2 to 3 tips for executives and managers in our community? How to develop a more accurate picture of the future?
You can start right away, right? The good thing is, and this is the first message if you want, so you can start right away with information that's already available. There are future scenarios. There is strategic intelligence, as I said, from the World Economic Forum. There's our world in data, visual capitalists, so many. It's not that much about where and how to get the information about the future. The second thing is start small, maybe with a workshop, and see which value it can create, like with your strategists or with different heads units. If you want, develop the drivers, the opportunities, also the uncertainties, and give them an assessment. What does it mean for your strategy and organization? And the third one is I would recommend really to make it a co-creative process, which means that it shouldn't be in these a silo or in the ivory tower. There are so many people in your organization who have the knowledge about like future developments in their specific area, and this is a big source for a future ready strategy. So make it open, make it a participatory process, and then it really will pay off, and it will also help you to deploy your future ready strategy.
Max, I also want to open, like to all listeners now, I want to open also Q&A. So if you have any specific questions, please put them in the comments and we will be very happy to discuss and answer them. From our community, we also got a few questions up front. There was one question, Max, about typical frameworks that you use to develop strategic foresight. Is there something you would want to mention?
So what I can definitely recommend is for the methods section is the Future Diamond by Popper, where you have all the different methods as an overview. Sometimes we use specific frameworks or different frameworks for different questions. So it really depends on what you want to achieve. What I can recommend is what we call a trend card. So when you do research on various trends, put them not in a 8 pages trend letter or something, put it on a single a chart with a short description, with an inspiration, also with a specific example, because the future hasn't happened yet, right? So you have to make it a little bit more tangible. So I really like to work with these trend cards, because in workshops you can really take them and move them around, cluster them, and compile your trend report. So this would be, one recommendation. There are frameworks like the consumer trend canvas when you're working more in the B2C area. But yeah, this is how we work most of the time.
There's another question saying the world is in constant movement. We have a war in Europe, inflation, a downturn. Did you see that coming? And maybe if I can interpret the question also a bit, do you also look at these kind of things? Maybe not specifically in our war in Europe, but is that also something, a trend that you expected, that there would be more in the world?
Definitely. That is where Foresight originated, right? It came out of the Second World War and Cold War, so more from the defense side, and to be one step ahead of the enemy. And these conflict scenarios are or have been core of Foresight work. The German armed forces have a Foresight department, and one of their scenarios is multipolar conflict. So we have different conflicts in the world, but no single polar. The other scenario is the two polar world, so USA versus China. And for an organization, it's important to anticipate this a little bit and adapt your strategy, or have at least plans ready to deploy when the world is moving in one or the other direction.
And what has changed strategic foresight? What are best practices now?
What definitely changes, what I said at the beginning, is that in the past there was, for example, Shell in the 70s, so the oil company, and Shell, they did a lot of scenarios where this originated. So all this scenario planning. Now it's more regarded as an organizational ability to be open to change, challenge the status quo, because it's certain that we will have uncertainties all the time in the future. So not only 2 or 3 foresight experts in a department, but to see it more as a capability for an organization. Some also coined the term future literacy, to be able to be prepared to have an holistic and open view for looking into the future. I think that has changed in the past years, moving a little bit away from the silo thinking in scenarios to a more broader, open, organizational ability.
Max, we also got a couple of questions from the audience. The first one from Nicholas, we can also bring it on here. At what point will paradigm or knowledge system change affect and or make less useful our current forecasting intelligence or current forecasting models? Do you think that they will become less important or useful at some point in time? Do you see something like that?
It really depends. I would divide this question a little bit, or the answer, in two parts. So the first one is the result. What do you get out of a foresight process? And then the second part is what the organization, the people are learning with this. And by doing foresight, or by being involved in foresight, it creates a mind change, I would say, so that you are prepared for change. And the current forecasting models don't take that much into account these different versions of the future, I would say. There are some exceptions, especially with regards to the energy sector, where you have these primary energy consumption scenarios, but in other sectors, don't see these different aspects of the future that much.
We have another question from Christian. It seems time spans to act on trends are getting shorter and shorter. Should you look at it once a year, a quarter, a month, a week, a day? What is your take on best practice? It also implies how often do you update your models yourself, your forecasting models, your foresighting models?
Of course we do. When you are working in a normal organization, many people deal with the day-to-day business, customers, new IT systems, whatsoever. So what we want to establish and what we want to create is to look beyond the next or 2 years. And this is incredibly challenging because people, when they go back to their desk, they are in the here and now. And to answer your question, there is a mega trend, urbanization, and that has been ongoing for the past at least 300, if not 500 years. So there are different levels of trends. Some call it micro trends, macro trends, and mega trends. 1 year, 2 to 5 years, more than 10 years. This is a framework how you can cluster these. And what I want you to encourage is to still do foresight work, because the consequence of shorter trend cycles could be, why shall we do all that stuff? If we are living in a VUCA world and we can't really anticipate, why do we do planning and strategy? But what I, especially after COVID, recognize when I talk to other people from other companies, that planning strategy is increasingly important. And one part of that is that you just also have to educate your people.
Thank you so much, Max. I think we're coming to an end. This was super interesting. We learned a lot about foresight. We learned that there's maybe not this one crystal ball, but maybe a lot of small crystal balls still. If you ask me, your profession is one of the most interesting and sought after professions right now in all the change that we live. I'm positive that our audience, surely including me, I learned a lot from your experience, Max, and I'm very grateful for it. Thank you a lot for being with us, everyone. And let us keep in touch. I'd like to invite you to follow our Expert Powers LinkedIn page for the next live event that will be up in a couple of weeks. And there will be many interesting speakers lined up for you, so don't miss it out. I'd like to say thank you for joining us today, and I wish you a joyful festive season and a successful start into the new year. If you do it here in between, take care and see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.